and we'll go ahead and get started. I didn't change the agenda a whole lot from the last time that we met, although I did add in some of the newest changes that are showing up in the Waldo Sandbox. We'll talk about the rest of it later as we get through the agenda. I'd like to remind you that the new documentation for Bibliovation version 6.0 is accessible through this page farther down in the documentation links. These are ever changing, ever evolving, and each time there is a new point release made out, Jane updates both the release notes and the appropriate sections of the documentation. Usually in the release notes, she also identifies where in the documentation things have been updated, which makes it a little easier to keep up with some of the changes and allows you to search in the document and go directly to the new information rather than paging through the whole thing. In the newest release, the newest version number to search 5.21.11. And there are a few changes that I'd like you to know about, and I'll show you as much as I can. In the, there are new options for displaying both in the results list and in the detailed record. And with the search that I just did, I'm getting into the detailed record, and I'll point out some of the new pieces that are here. What I've noticed in the button line is that there's a little bit more space between the discovery layer button and the previous button. I think that's just visually a little bit easier to discern the difference from what each of those buttons do. But where most of the work has been done is in the holdings information. So I'm going to flip back to the release notes here. Item holdings table on the discovered layer title page has been reworked, and it's been reworked in both the public catalog and in the staff catalog, or in the staff view. So when I show you what is here, it's going to look very similar, although not identical, to the discovery layer. The piece that I want to point out is that the holdings information down here is below the actual bibliographic information that's displayed. There typically are 3 columns in a display of a record. There is the left-hand panel where we have, in this particular instance, different options of looking and viewing the record. We have the actual record, and then there is a place for the book image, if there is one. Okay, so before, what used to happen is that the bibliographic information and the holdings information were all considered one section, and the holdings information was contained within that middle panel, that middle column that is available. And in some cases, the information that necessitated a scroll bar, so you could see through to the last bit of information that was displayed. However, they have actually separated the bibliographic information from the holdings information, which you can see if you look at the source, the page source. You can see how the different pieces are laid out now. There are a couple of things that I want to comment on here. First of all, when we have different holdings records attached to a single bibliographic record, they are going to be split apart as you see them here. They're not going to be all in one window. This is basically two different windows here. And within each of the branches, it is possible that you will have different information appearing for the records that are attached to that holdings record. As you can see here in the first, in the test branch, there's current location, shelving location here, and then collection code added in on the bottom one, Koha item type and shelving location, barcode, etc. So there are a lot more options that we have available in terms of identifying the information. The other thing that we have available at this point in time is that you can decide which columns are going to appear in the display by going to Administration, Item Fields, and going through the options that are available in the item field. Now, the item fields table that is here is what basically is driving the display of the holdings. So if you want to have something different than the default holdings that come as the basic initial view of the records, you'll have to become familiar with this particular page and the setup that goes with this page. There are more columns that are available in the item field setup, and they are fully documented in the Super Librarian Guide, and there are also some really general things in the user manual. So we'll just sort of look at this a little bit, and the columns that are the same is the action, the code, the display label, and the type. Now, functionality that existed before gave us the capability to move any field from the position that it exists as it's displayed here to another position. For example, if we wanted the copy number to immediately follow the item call number, we can just simply grab hold of those three dots and move it up into the table. And from now on, the copy number, if there is one, will display after the item call number. The display label that will be seen by patrons and by staff is copy number. The field is defined as text. So you can see we have lots of different options that we can choose for this particular field. And in this case, it's called public. Okay, when it's called public, it means that public, staff, and edit are all available. So if you have a field that anyone can see, that would be a public. If a field is identified as edit, that means that it can be seen only while a form is displayed, like an item form, entering an item form or changing one. And a staff will be a field that is available to be seen and edited by staff in the staff view. None is used for some of the fields, like on this one it's set so volume information doesn't appear. So that would not be available to display anywhere. Now, in this particular setup, there are a couple of new fields. The first one I want to talk about is this one called secondary. And in talking about this, I'm going to flip over here to the Super Librarian Guide and come back to, let's see. Let me look here first. Yes, I forgot the visibility one. Well, no, I talked about the visibility, but I didn't name the field itself. Okay, so the next one is the secondary, and this is a brand new setting that's available in Bibliovation 6.0. This is not something that you'll see in either 5.18 or 5.20, but it is something that is going to be in the next version. This new setting will allow you to identify if you want to have a short display of your item information and give basic information like the location where that item is shelved, the item type, the call number, and maybe availability. Maybe those are the only things that you want to show, but then you want to identify other fields to show as a secondary layer that will provide additional information for the public. In order to do that, the secondary field has 3 different options. A yes means that it'll show on a secondary line in both staff and public. The pub means it'll show in the public display, but on the main line in staff, and no means it will always show on the primary line. When that secondary field is there, I'm not sure if there's a I think there's a display. Okay. What I was looking for was a screen print of the display that Jane had added in here, but I don't see one, so I'm going to go back into the catalog. Okay, had I had one of these fields set up as a secondary field, there would be an arrow in front of the item, and if I clicked on it, the additional information would show up on the second line. Right now on this display, I don't have one set up to do that. But it is something that can be useful for your patrons. If you want to keep your item display short and simple, it does give you a way to identify other information to the users as needed. Okay. With this, on this particular display, since I'm in staff mode, there is a new icon that appears with the call number. And what this icon will do will open a new window, and it will pull the call number into the quick call number printing program. Okay, and after all of that, the call number does appear up here, so it's assuming that the label stock you have loaded in whichever printer you have defined for this would be ready for that kind of a label. And then there is this button. Do any of you use the label printing capability in the software right now? Okay. Janelle, do you use the part where you go through tools and you set up pages, et cetera, in that, or do you use the quick print? You've used it. Okay, and Jennifer, you've used it a bit. This is something that I think is more public library oriented, but it's available. Everybody can use it. That's why it's here. Okay, so let me close my window here. Trying to think if there's anything else on this. The key for this new option of being able to identify what displays, again, is version 6.0. If I wanted to look at this in the discovery layer, just so that you can see the difference in how the two display, first thing is that the image is on the left-hand side of the page unless you change it in your discovery layer. The bibliographic information is located here, and because of the positioning of the holdings information, it shows up way down here at the bottom. You'll also know that we have all of the different items in one display. So in the setup that exists for this, I didn't have something different for, no, that's not it. In my discovery layer setup, I have a different setup for the staff setting, the staff view versus the public view. You'll notice that in this particular view, we have this group by holdings record. If I click on group by holdings record, this will look like what we saw in the staff side. I'm going to have to ask about the space because you don't want to have everything way down here when your patrons are looking for something available at the top. Okay. So there is another difference that I've seen going through the displays, and that is I've seen this show one more, but I haven't found it documented anywhere yet. But whenever this exists here, there will be an arrow, and it will show whatever is duplicated. What I'm interpreting that is it will show the first field, whether it's a subject, an ISBN, call number, whatever field it is, it'll show the first one by default. And then if you want to see the rest of them, you have to click on the down arrow to see the rest of the fields that are in there. I am not sure why that is. I'm not sure why they did that, and I will have to find out. But that is something that applies not only to the detail record but also to the results list. Okay, so if I were to go the display list, the results list for the results of my search have this show one more in other areas. So it shows additional, where I see it most often is with the ISBN as I look at the detailed. And it also has the simple and permanent displays, simple and holdings record displays that's available here, but it's not showing my my information there. I do have another window open here into the Discovery Layer Editor, and in the Discovery Layer Editor, the area that I am looking at is the one that's called Search Results Details. And this is where those different options are configured. So if you want the display holdings information with search results, you would put a check mark here. This group items by holdings record, I don't have checked, so I'm not sure how this relates to how it is currently displaying. I know that they've been doing a lot of work on this particular one, so I'm not sure if everything is in sync yet. So for example, since this isn't checked, I wouldn't expect to see the group by holdings option given anywhere. I would just get the normal one. The show items or holdings below columns, you can control that with this particular option. Right now, it's turned on in the Waldo sandbox. I can turn it off simply by unchecking this. And then the holdings would display as you see them in version 518 or 520. The display hold branch first is if you have multiple branches and you want to differentiate, you can do that by clicking on this box. Most of you, I think, have a single library, so you won't usually be concerned about that. For the holdings records, for the MFHD holdings, if you have records that have holdings, it will show the location for items even when it matches the data in the grouped items. That particular one has another option that is a useful one. I think that this is the value that turns on the capability of viewing the 866 free text holdings information on demand in the catalog. Let me go back over here. Okay, so Time Magazine, sorry about that. Okay, Time Magazine is the record. When I click and display the entire record, you'll notice that here we have that show option again, and it will show whatever 5XX notes exist in the record. Actually, this is just the 500 notes, I'm sorry. What we have here is a new column, or it's not a new column, but it's a text holdings. And in this case, for the MFHD line, we have this show. If we put in show, it will show us what is in the 866 field. So whether this is going to be useful or not for your patrons, that's for you to decide. But you do control it through the discovery layer configuration. Okay. Let me go back over here. Showed you the quick label print. Okay, there is a new option available in the hold queue. There are options called fill, pass, and trace. For this, I'm going to come back to my patrons. I'm sorry, I'm showing you the wrong thing. Let me get back up here again. In the patrons record, let me come back here. Okay. I have to remember what's on all my different screens here. The check-in pass trace options are documented in the user manual, and the options are designed primarily for multi-library or consortium, but the check-in and the trace options are useful for single library sites as well. And the check-in option allows you to check in holds in books from the holds queue itself, rather than having to go back out, open up the check-in screen, and then check in the item. So that's something that I think you would be interested in. This is usually something that you would do as you clean off your hold shelf, as you check the queue and you see items that have been there beyond the days that are supposed to be there, you can do the check-in again from the holds display. The pass allows you to bypass the current item that is in the queue if it's for a title that has more than one item. And the trace option, which is the last one here, is an interesting one. It will remove it from the holds queue, and it will send the request to the next library or for the next item, and it will also change the status in the item record to traced. Now, one of the changes to the statuses in version, I think it is actually in version 5.20, is that there are specific statuses that have been predefined, one of them being trace, and up until now, I hadn't found how that particular value is used. But this is where it is used. If in the holds report, there's an item that's on the holds report, but you can't find it on the hold shelf, you can mark it as being traced, and it will not only mark it in the holds queue, but it will also change the status in the hold status in the item record, so that the staff is aware when they look at the record that this is something that has to be found before it can be used to fill a request. Okay. Okay. Are there any questions about these? The release notes are at that same address, but they are updated again. And again, the update version is 5.21.11. I do want to point out one other thing that is here, which you probably already noticed and don't need to be shown, but the second line here, that the versioning starts at 5.21.01 for development releases, and it will change to version 6 at production release. So when you look at these, remember that these are upcoming features that are going to be available later. There are also on the release notes 3 different additions for acquisitions. These are normally in the acquisitions updates are usually in their own release notes, but for these 3, because they are somewhat significant, they did decide to put them into this one as well. Now, the version numbering for acquisitions does not follow the same versioning numbers for the basic software package. So I think these, I'm not sure which version these apply to. I think these apply to what is in your sandboxes right now. So if you use acquisitions, I would suggest looking at these particular fields and setting them appropriately for your library. Okay. There have been a few libraries that have Sierra, I don't believe that there is that same option. The call slips are a different section of the software, and it doesn't act the same way as a whole, so I don't think that there is. You have to go through the menu in order to get to the check-in for those. Okay, I'm going to skip a lot of these things. The 520 update. There are a couple of libraries that have scheduled their upgrades. I'm encouraging everyone to schedule your update as soon as you can. Remember the last time that we talked, I told you that Bibliovation version 6.0 is in production right now in some libraries already. I don't know which ones they are, but when I last talked to Patrick about it, he said that they could change the release version to 6.0 anytime that they felt that it was ready for release. And I haven't asked him to do that because I know that there are a lot of you that have not yet scheduled your upgrades. So I'm hoping that we can get a few more people scheduling their update, and then I'll discuss the topic with him again and see if we can have some kind of a date when Bibliovation version 6.0 is available for production. Actually, let me step back a minute. The first thing that I would want to do is make sure that all of the sandboxes get updated to the Bibliovation 6.0 version so that you can work with it before you make a decision to upgrade. Right now, your sandbox is on version 5.20. So when you are ready to start looking at this new version, I would certainly appreciate you telling me so I can ask them to upgrade your sandboxes. In the enhancement list, the one that I sent out via email earlier, I had not updated, and I did update after I sent it out, but there was a new request that came in to change any U into a 0 in the fixed field 008 bytes 7 through 10 range. Ben wrote a justification for this, and basically it's to make the faceting work a little bit better. And if you're trying to, when you're trying to use it, it will just drop that U out of the search, and instead of searching for 195U or 19UU, the data is interpreted as 195 or 19. And of course, those are not valid dates for years. So what this would do, it would give you at least a starting date, and then you could do a range of dates in your facet. I don't have any spot here to add this explanation, but it is something that I am keeping in my email so that I can put this on when we start identifying which requests we want to go forward. Okay, that's about all that I have for today. Are there any questions, any comments? Ben, do you want to talk about your updates to the request to change a U to a 0 in the date field? Or will you send them to me?
Hi, Becky. I think what I'll probably do is reply to that message that I sent earlier, but Jennifer summed up one of the things. The information that finds its way into the 260 and the 264, 264 is actually being used as well, which is one of the things I'll update in the email. Might be a little bit better. The information that ends up in the fixed fields is sometimes a little bit off. I've also found that the letter U is not the only thing that's found its way into that spot. But we'll work on it.
I've seen hyphens or
yeah, question marks, blanks, yeah.
Okay, so anything that isn't a 4-digit year.
Right. Yeah, and we should, you know, I always defer to catalogers as far as this is concerned, but Jennifer does have a point that the information that's going into the 260 to the 264 is more accurate as far as the date that we'd like to confer for the item in question. The problem that we have, at least for a couple of records, and the cataloging on this, I think it was done by someone else. There was a situation where the date was put in the 260 subfield C as December 30th, 1995. And COA went through, and there was no date put into the fixed field. COA went through, got to that field, and then took the first 4 digits that it saw. So it was showing up as the year 3019. More cataloging work from the future.
That sounds like a fun record.
That, I think that's more like human error. So I don't know what I would expect LibLime to do in order to take care of that. I'm kind of intrigued by their ability to go through and look at text fields, strip out the integers, and then present those. So, Jennifer's got more clarification.
Okay, so more catalogers put a 4-digit guess there instead of the fixed fields. Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, are the fixed fields usually updated as diligently as the information in the 260 and the 264? From my cataloging days, I remember lots of people, they said, what, we should change the dates in the fixed field and why, and a lot of times it wasn't done. Yeah, and most of the systems that I'm aware of take the indexing point not from the 260 or 264, but from the 008 for limiting purposes. So that's one reason why it's important to keep those up to date, and it's also a reason why we need to look at alternative ways for date limiting, I think. Okay, so I'll keep all this information together, Ben, and figure out some way how to get all of that in our list so that I don't lose track of it.
Thank you.
Are there any other new enhancements that people have been thinking about, that something is nagging at you that it doesn't work the way that you wish it would, and therefore you would like to see something changed? Okay, seeing Anybody else have any questions or comments to make? Jennifer, I'll check with South Central and see when they're interested and start talking about authorities enhancements. This is something that I'll add this to the new feature or the enhancements, the information about the NACO normalization, but I do think that we need to sort of push them on that. I won't know until next week sometime when South Central is now looking at upgrading to Bibliovation 6.0. My guess is that it's going to be in the fall or possibly even early next year. So they may not be interested in talking about authorities enhancements until after they go live. I'm going to try and encourage them to, work with us on it before then. I do know that they do have a couple of enhancements on their enhancement list with LibLime that are authorities that I think we should be given an opportunity to provide input against. So I'll do some talking with them. Okay, and if there's nothing else, today's meeting is over. Next meeting is April 25th. And it's really hard to believe that we're getting close to the end of the semester, but we really are. So next time we'll talk about meetings in May and how many meetings and when they should be held, and also talk about summer. Thank you all for attending and listening, and keep in mind that the release notes and the documentation are updated continually and is the best place to find information about the software. Thank you.